Hey guys, so today I'm just going to talk really quickly on how we can set up our tree diagrams that we're talking about and why we want to set up our tree diagrams. So we're starting to look at things that we've talked about, events like flipping a coin or rolling a die or anything like that. What we're going to start talking about now is what if we do multiple of these? Let's say I flip 3 coins. Not quite as easy as just a heads or tails because I'm going to have 3 different answers for every whole answer. So if I'm flipping 3 coins, we could look at, well, we could go, oh, maybe we'll have all heads, or we'll have heads and 1 tail, or tail, heads, tails. And we can just keep listing things out like this, but eventually, and already, I'm starting to get confused as to where I want to go with this, right? So it's hard to keep everything organized like that and figure out all of our possible outcomes through that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what's called a tree diagram. And these are actually very simple to follow through. I know that the writing on the paper may be a little difficult. It is hard to do this without showing any drawings or anything. So hopefully this video will help us. But with every tree diagram, we're just going to break down every single event that happens. So we're going to do 3 coin flips. And we're just going to start one at a time. Okay, let's deal with our first coin flip. Every time we flip a coin, it can go either heads or tails. So that's our first flip. Now we're going to move on to flip number 2. And when we flip a second coin, well, let's say we flipped it the first time we got heads. The next time we flip it, we can still have 2 things, heads or tails. And even if we got tails the first time, we can still get either heads or tails. So we can either start here for our 2 coins, we could have either gotten heads, 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 tails, tails, heads, or tails, tails. Now we'll move on to our third and final outcome, or flip, which for every single one of these that we could have ended up on, this last coin flip, once again, there's 2 options, either heads or tails. If we had gotten tails on that one, it could have either been heads or tails. So I'm going to fill in this entire row with heads or tails branching off of each of those. And that's why we call this a tree diagram, because it's kind of like the roots of a tree going down into the ground, or if we flip it over, it's like the branches of a tree going up, or we can even write these going sideways. And it looks like a branch breaking off into a bunch more little branches as we go. So it doesn't matter which way we orient our tree diagrams, just as long as they all flow in a smooth fashion. So as we look at this, now we know we can go heads, 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 tails, heads, tails, heads, heads, tails, tails. Or we could start with the tail and go tail, heads, heads, tail, heads, tails, tail, tail, head, or tails, tails, tails. So those are all of our possible things. And notice how all of them ended on this row. So if we go through and count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different possible outcomes. And there are 8 outcomes. Now it's not telling us that our 8 outcomes are heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails. It's that flow of that branch down to that bottom that is a full outcome. And so it can work really easily like that with, if you're just doing one type of thing like flips, it's all just going to keep breaking down like that. Or it could look a little bit different. Let's say we have something that has 2 events that aren't the exact same thing. So we're not always sticking with that coin. Let's say this time we start with a coin. So we're going to flip a coin. So we're going to do 1 coin and 1 die. So we're going to roll 1 6-sided cube as well as flipping 1 coin. What we're going to do is we're going to start, well, let's just choose the coin to start. The coin, as we know, can go either heads or tails. And then, depending on whether we get heads or tails, it doesn't matter. We're still going to roll that die. And every die, no matter if it was a heads or tails that we started with, still has 6 different outcomes that we can have. And there's that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it still branches all the way out through that. So we still end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 possible outcomes. Now, just because I put heads, tails for the coin first and then the die second, doesn't mean we have to do that. We could start with that die. We could start with 1, 4, 5, 6, and then from each of those, we could branch off with the heads, tails. And it's still going to give us the same 12 outcomes. We're just looking at it, instead of doing the coin first, we're looking at the die first, but it really doesn't change anything. Sorry, those are two completely different tree diagrams that represent the same thing, but they're not touching each other at all. So we could go through it those two different ways. It doesn't matter which one you go first, it's still going to give you the same. And that's kind of closer to what it looks like when we're looking at the closed situation on our last problem. You can either start with the shirts first or the pants first, but either way you're still going to get the same number of outcomes and the same lists of outcomes. Hope everyone's doing all right. Have a nice day.